I heard. And Morgan's got such a thick hair. Oh, did you take her up to the Miracle Farm?
No, I had an appointment for it.
Okay.
And then I did it at home.
Nothing. You didn't see anything. Okay.
But we've been sick. I
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to update you on the dome. Moving. It's moving quick.
The one's down by U.S. Foods.
Wyvick Lane. Lyvic Lane. Yeah.
That's where I just did a big job there. Side business, but we had cameras for my neighbor is.
Okay. Yeah, good.
I know right where you go.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
It's going to be a game changer, I'll tell you right now.
We need it.
More than anything. Our kids need it. Kelly, did you see my email? My mommy! I said, Kelly will appreciate this. Liv won the, huh? This is going to go quick, right? Yeah. Why? Are you doing?
How you doing, Dan?
Hey, Dr. Robinson, how are you?
Good. Good to see you. I haven't. I found out.
Did you do it yet?
No, because the doctor was out of town. So he came back yesterday. So if he doesn't call me tomorrow, I'm going to call him. So I knew he was going to be out of town. So
How was the wedding?
It was good.
Awesome.
Because since I was going to be out of town, I was impressed.
Yeah.
But
Now it's time in. Time in.
Yeah, you're going, my, Jesus Christ, Kelly just wants you to know.
Yeah, Christina's really sick.
Christina's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have to touch it. You just have to speak towards it.
Yeah.
You go first. I got a wider one.
So I think this part of the meeting, we don't use the gavel. We're so used to doing that. But it seems right at any rate. And we'll repeat this. It doesn't hurt to do this twice. Please join me, stand, and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, then we'll start for. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you all for coming, and I expect that we may have more people joining us. This is scheduled to go from 6 to 7. We have a lighter schedule on our regular meeting tonight, so depending on response, we may be able to add some flexibility on the end. This is, I just want to explain a couple things, why we're doing this. We're doing this because in the first case, this is a really important issue, and it's one that we have talked about here at the table. We've taken some initiatives from the district side. A lot of people give us advice on this, and there's a lot of advice to be had on this. The other is that as a board, our normal procedure tonight isn't a business meeting where we invite people to give comment, but sometimes that's frustrating, I know, from the audience side, and actually frustrating sometimes from our side, because our rules say that we won't respond. We won't get into a dialogue. We want to provide, though, a couple opportunities during the year where we can have dialogue with people. And so we thought what we would do tonight is have an opening presentation on where we are as a district, and then open this up to discussion. And I say that there may be some professionals in the room who could contribute to this. May contribute in other ways, providing services, those kinds of things. Tonight, we're really focused on trying to have an exchange where we all leave this part of the meeting with a better understanding of what the issue is, a sense of what we've been doing here, what we see moving forward, and maybe what else we could be doing, that we would jointly come to this point. This issue is so large, and Naomi, I know it sits in your mind too. We were both a weekend and a half ago, a number of us were at the State School Boards Convention, and I went to 2 presentations on mental health, and because I knew this was coming up, and I know it's one of those issues. Every time there's an issue in our society, the first response is we need to do a better job in mental health. One of the things I'll just give one sort of statistic that I hear. The reason it's really important, as was pointed out by the professionals at the conference, and I'm sure we'll hear this again tonight, is the failure to deal with mental health issues only exacerbates the problem as a child and a young adult ages out. That the incidence of other mental health issues later on in life can somewhat be predicted by the lack of mental health services early on. So I think it's really appropriate that our district has been wrestling with this issue, but it's an issue that just we don't wrestle with on this side of the board. We know that in families and in communities and in churches and professionals that we're all trying to deal with this, and sometimes on an issue like this, it's good to level set, to get to a point where we all have the same kind of starting point. And the starting point tonight is where we've been, where we see this going, and then listening to people and see what suggestions, what comments, what questions they have, so we have better understanding. We hope to have at least one other forum during the year. Depending on the outcome tonight, we may decide to come back and do, mental health too, well, because, and this forum is entitled Mental Health and Wellness, because they clearly fit together. And so with that, Superintendent Robinson, would you like to comment?
No, actually, I'll just ask Mrs. Carmen to come forward. And as Mrs. Carmen come forward, Becky is one of several people, but one of the main point person that deals with partnerships within the community as part of her role. And one of the major partnerships that we've had is with various individuals, not only service providers, but even state education department, working with them in terms of policy and respective committees. So you hear about some of that tonight. So I think it's be a great opportunity for Becky to provide an overview, as well as Tracy.
This is Tracy Gilbert. She's from Saratoga Center for the Family, and we have a partnership with Saratoga Center for the Family for mental health counseling here at Chen, but you'll hear a little bit more about that. But before I get started, I just really want to thank you all, the Board of Education, for having this tonight, and I think it's an important topic to be discussed. Thank you again. So mental health wellness, as Mr. Casey already started laying the foundation, can greatly affect students functioning at school, in the home, and in the community as a whole. And schools, in partnership with community-based mental health organizations, are among the largest providers of mental health services to children. Additionally, schools serve as a setting where early mental health concerns are often first identified. So site-based programs lead to immediacy of interventions, reducing disciplinary distraction, and enhancing culture of teaching and learning. So we ask, why Shen? Why do we have this at Shen? Over the last several years, our district has seen an increase in mental health concerns in mental health needs of our students. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has shared these national statistics, and we see that our students are diagnosed with various mental health related issues between the ages of 8 to 15. And with what we know with the research and what we know here at Shen with various data that we have, we know that mental health wellness deserves our attention. The district values student health and wellness, and that's why we have it as a district goal this year. So we continue to focus on health and wellness, and we have actually for several years. So we also look at, what is mental health? And a lot of times, you, I know, went to several different sessions at NSBA. I also just went to a recent training with our student support counselor, Nikki Tabano, from the high school, and we learned a lot there about terminology that's being used and what are we calling it? Are we calling it mental health? Are we saying mental health issues, mental health problems? What does it look like? So mental health and wellness is really what the focus is, and what the terminology, that's being used from Mental Health Association of New York State, as well as New York State SED now, with the new mandates that are coming out related to that. So individuals who experience mental health issues may experience mood, thinking, and behavioral concerns, and many factors contribute to mental health concerns, could be the biological makeup, the brain chemistry, life experiences, trauma, and Tracy's going to talk about that a little bit, and our family history of mental health. So Tracy's going to really talk about the mental health issues that are facing our teens here at Shen, and talk about some of the things that she is seeing with the students that she works with here.
Thank you. So as Becky said, I'm Tracy Gilbert from Saratoga Center for the Family. So I'm lucky enough to have an office in between Shattuckon and Naranjan. And hello out there, Julie. Nice to see another Shattuckon face. And just as a side note, Julie was unbelievably welcoming to me as I started 2 years ago at Shattuckon. I can't even tell you, I still have my note from her on my bulletin board. Just a little tangent there. So thank you, Shattuckon. So what we see is that mental health really is pervasive across the lifespan, but especially in childhood and adolescent onset. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm blocking it. Okay. So many folks are finding that 25% of American youth have experienced a serious traumatic event by their 16th birthday. Nearly 25% of teens, 13 to 18, have mental health diagnosis that interferes with their health functioning on a day-to-day basis. Many of the folks that we see in elementary, middle school, and high school, these things may have been going on for a while, but we're just identifying them and trying to figure out what we can do with them next. So right now, we started the program at Shattuckon, Naranjan, and at High School East. Now we're at all levels serving kids from in all different buildings, which is lovely because we can identify and be working with kids at all ages. So sometimes it's hard to figure out what's going on. One of the things that has become, as terminology has become more common, I think many people are familiar with the term ADHD, hyperactivity, inattentiveness. What can happen when somebody has experienced trauma is that a lot of those symptoms can overlap with ADHD and look awfully similar. So typically, you might see a kid that's inattentive, that's struggling to pay attention in class, and if you look at the overlap, there's an awful lot of similarities just in behaviors and functioning that without someone identifying what is this, can we tease it out, someone might be very quick to say, oh, this child has ADHD, when really it's based on early childhood experiences or a single experience that just happened. So, for example, I have a young elementary school age girl that I'm working with right now who had a really significant event happen over the summer. This is a child who really wants to do well, but is struggling to be attentive in class. Because of the traumatic event, she tends to freeze up and just lose focus. She gave me permission to share with her teacher that she had such a tough event, not the specifics, but just, heads up, over the summer this happened. I shared this graphic with the teacher, and we were able to come up with a plan of when these things were happening, how the teacher could intervene, how the teacher could help her and have the student move on instead of getting stuck and think, why is this child not paying attention? What's going on? So it could easily be flagged learning disability, ADHD, things like that. It turned out it was really from this experience. In turn, I can be teaching the child skills that she can be using at home, in the classroom, in the hallway, in the lunchroom, and then staff around can reinforce that. One of the other pieces that I'm extremely passionate about is a study that was done by Kaiser Permanente. I think there's probably almost 300,000 people that participated in this study at this point in California. And so they studied adverse childhood experiences, and ACEs for short, and the impact that ACEs have had on somebody's functioning. So as you can see from the statistics, kids who have had adverse childhood experiences, not cause and effect, but definitely some significant correlation between those early childhood experiences that were pretty toxic and functioning later on. So the catch is how to help kids deal with toxic stress so they can move on and be successful at home, in sports, in school, socially, all those different things. Be confident, be attentive, just a good participant. So what we know about mental health is that early intervention is really the key, that we have to help flag these things early, utilize supports all around, and just give some skills to move on so these things aren't the life sentence and more like, okay, now what? So in talking about early intervention and preventing those catastrophic events, I'm going to turn that over to Becky.
So if as a district and a community, we are not identifying and providing students with those services early, as Tracy was just talking about, and having that early intervention piece, we know that the impact can be detrimental. With each year comes new academic, new social and personal demands, and students need strategies in order to be able to deal with those demands. They also need to have an adult, somebody that they're comfortable with, somebody that they've identified with at school. They need to have that connection, and they need to know how to access those resources. Removing the stigma and normalizing students' self-advocacy for mental health supports in the building early on is paramount, and that's what you keep hearing throughout, is that early intervention piece. And that's a piece that as a district we continue to work on, is how can we reach those students at a younger age, or as soon as possible, as soon as we're aware of the situation. As a district, we continue to work towards that early identification piece, where that might come through a particular writing in an English class where they've expressed something, through health education discussion, through something that they've shared with their counselor in school regarding something that's going on at home. A teacher may communicate to, another adult that this is something that the student had shared with them. So these are early identification. These are ways in which we can, try to connect early with students. Also, the intervention piece is something that, we continue to work on here as a district, and support is triaged and via administrators, school counselors, social workers, the student support counselor at the high school. We're really, again, looking for that timely intervention. Parent contact is made. Part of the process increases efficiency of services. It is critical that the school counselor, the person who is working with the student, who has identified the mental health issue or concern, has that parent contact. So how do we do this? So if you look at, what is needed, how do we integrate this into our system as a whole? How do we build the mental health and wellness across our system K-12? We have curriculum across the board, whether it's through health education, whether it's through elementary counseling, middle school counseling, high school counseling. There's also opportunities through various courses that are being taught to have it embedded, as well as through clubs. We also have the Student Center, which was formerly known as the Wellness Center. And again, we changed, the high school looked at that, the name of it, and wanted to change the name so that it created a environment where students felt that there wasn't a stigma attached to it, and they could go in there. And there's all kinds of supports in there, in that student center, from counseling services, social and emotional support, there's crisis intervention, there's group facilitation, emotional intelligence skills, meditation, there's special education goals that are set. They conduct psychological and academic evals, social skills training, there's collaboration with community services, there's that advocacy piece, the connection to community resources. They're collaborating with administration, school counselors, nurses, teachers, and support staff. Goals, reintegration into the school day. That's a huge piece that we've been focusing on as a district. When we talk about students who are leaving for hospitalizations, how do we integrate them back into the school system to ensure that they're successful? Who are they talking to? What kind of plan do we have in place? And how are we coming back to revisit that plan and recheck to make sure that the student is okay? And priority, whenever possible, scheduling appointments during free periods, during their lunch periods, ensuring that we're not interrupting the instructional day. We do know that sometimes that's not possible, but having services on site obviously much easier to access than having them leave and be gone for a significant portion of the day. We also continue professional development. We have the partnership with Saratoga Center for the Family and Wellspring, which used to be which was formerly the Saratoga Domestic Violence and Rape Crisis Center. They also are in that support center to offer services as well in there. And we also work with Captain and the CAP teams through a lot of services and partnerships that we have with them. So Tracy's just going to briefly touch on Saratoga Center for the Family and the support services that they offer here in the district.
So as I mentioned, this is our third year that Saratoga Center for the Family has been in partnership with Shen. We started out with me running back and forth between Chautauqua, Orongen, and High School East, and now we've expanded to being, as I mentioned, at all the different levels, which is really terrific. So kids can really tap into the services across the district. I explain it to a lot of people as if our outpatient mental health clinic just dropped into Shen, and so in that little space, somebody can stop in, access those services, and head back without, as Becky mentioned, missing a considerable amount of time, which is terrific. I love the fact that I can collaborate so much with staff and with parents and just make it really keeping the loop. It's really terrific as far as finding an intervention or strategy that works both in the classroom and at home and on the playground and on the bus and in all of these spaces. I think that it makes the kids feel more successful. I think it helps the parents to feel like they've got some things that they can be doing, that there's somebody who sees different facets. I love collaborating with the staff. I think they're terrific. I think it breaks down a lot of barriers when it comes to finding a provider because it's really accessible. It's been very nice to be around at open houses and things like that where parents can walk down and check it out. What is this space? What does it look like? We have students that graduate out of services when they don't need it anymore. We certainly don't want people to stay in therapy forever. As much as I'm personally sad to say goodbye to people professionally, it's a really good thing to have them move on to what's next. I think that one of the really nice things about the agency that I work for is that we offer some grants and other services so that if financial needs are an issue, that there's not as many barriers there. Transportation is also lovely since that's not a barrier since I'm right and the other clinicians are right at the school site. Parents can refer, staff can refer. It's kind of a nice backwards forwards situation. So I think that one of the other barriers that parents find a lot is wait lists in other places, and we can prioritize students. We can really think about who needs it and when and how and coordinate so they're not missing important things in class. We certainly want kids in class as much as possible. I think that the other thing that's really handy is that as kids transition from one grade level to another, they can continue services if needed. So I've had some elementary school students that are now in middle school that I'm still seeing. On the other hand, now that we have a therapist who's at the middle school, that they had the option to transition to that person since they were right there. All of those things are really nice, just to offer choices and have things as easy as possible.
So one of the things that we continuously talk about is what work do we need to continue doing? And obviously we have a lot of work that we need to continue doing. We need to continue to educate staff and students and community about what mental health wellness is and how do we continue to promote it across the district. And one of the things that we can do it through training, we can do it through advocacy, through our community partnerships, and connecting individuals, families to services, and also we need to focus on staff as well. What are some of those things that we can do for our staff? We need to focus on the whole system, the students as well as the staff, and I really wanted to stress that piece of it because everyone is part. When I talk about the community, it's the school community and the outside community. Really just wanted to leave this quote with you all tonight.
Becky, do you feel that we've made some big steps early into the?
Just speak up a little.
Oh, I'm
louder.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm never told to do that, Bill. It's fine.
I probably won't do it again.
Do-
The last slide. The resources. Just say click.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you meant to go back, excuse me.
No. There you
Yeah.
go.
Do you think we've been able to have early interventions more so since we've, I know through the last couple of years, we've really concentrated on this. So in early, you're talking about a first grader. Are you seeing that at the early stages, and are you able to intervene and then, follow that through?
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, we have data monthly, and we definitely are serving students K-12. And, based on some of the location of where the offices are, once you place somebody there, the referrals seem to come from that particular school. Tracy's been at Aranjan and Shattuck from the time that we started the partnership with them, and that caseload was full pretty quick. But absolutely, we are seeing students earlier. And we have had many success stories. We've had parents who have come with, with a lot of feedback and accolades.
Good. Tracy, I have one question just to help frame the services that you provide and the Center for the Family provides. So how would you describe your role? Do you screen? You talked about strategies, you talked about continuing to connect, but then there's a professional community out there, right? And we refer people out, and you've got a resource list, and you've probably got a whole list of providers, but what's your the Center for the Family's primary on-site role?
Outpatient mental health counseling.
Outpatient.
So we're billing a child's health insurance for outpatient counseling just the same way as if they were at our center.
Okay.
And we do that in the individual way, family way, whatever is needed. So it's exactly the same thing as if they were seeing an outside provider. We just happen to have a satellite office at the center.
I have a question. What is your role in the CSE?
I'm not
involved in it.
no.
This is completely.
No,
How do these overlap in any way?
This is an outside provider who's providing a service on site. So we always refer to it, you say, a satellite office type of thing. School-related committees, CSCs, Tracy is not involved in that process unless she's working with a specific client and has been asked to attend or to report certain data or information that pertains to that particular situation, but she is not typically part of those committees. That is a job, responsibility, and a duty of people that work for our district as a whole.
So why don't we ask if anyone from the public would like to comment? You can stand up and do it there. I mean, you can come up, we have microphones and that kind of thing, but we can hear you, and hopefully everybody else can. And Todd Gilbert, our vice president, is going to try to coordinate this just so we make sure everybody who wants to speak is seen. And
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Donovan Flo. I'm a mental health provider in the community. I work as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So I believe we share a lot of patients. Thank you so much for the information. It's so important.
So nice to know what you look like. I'm communicating over phone so much, and I had no idea you looked like that. So how terrific.
Nice to be here. Thank you. What I'm finding, I have 4 children here in the school district and see quite a few kids and adults in the community, and I definitely applaud the effort to reduce stigma and get early intervention out there as far as educating about the different disease states of mental illness. That can begin as early as 8 years old, such as, what is depression, what does that look like, what is anxiety, what's happening, even in a very watered down, biochemical level to understand, what is this just me, a weakness, incorporating that into health curriculums. I'm not sure if that's been started yet. I missed the first couple of minutes.
Yes, It is incorporated into health education curriculums, and SED, there's a new mandate that came out as of July 1st, 2018. All health education curriculum has to have a mental health wellness component. We have been doing it for years, and we do hit on it from at the elementary level, but very developmentally appropriate. Can we do a better job? Absolutely, but it is starting younger, the conversations.
Things the CDC said, like ADHD, for instance, children go unmedicated 4 times more likely to become addicted to drugs, to get into car accidents, to get into fights, get suspended, not graduate. And I think bringing that down to kids' levels, in the school setting would definitely be helpful as well. So I work in private practice in the community. I've also started my own company called Brighten Up, which will be rolling out webinars in January to educate parents and the public on numerous mental health related issues and topics for a very, very minuscule fee. Just, our mission is to increase awareness and accessibility to services. We also will be partnering with a telepsychiatry company to offer medication management, and that may be something that we could think about integrating here into the school at the same time, virtually offering that option to increase compliance. So thank you for this topic. Ed, if there's anything
Thank you.
please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you know what, I'm thinking here too, with all the populations moving as from the Medicaid redesign initiative at New York State, so now we look at all these populations, nursing home, TBI, pieces of population that move over to, they have to go to a mainstream, like a health plan, okay, those populations move over. And they are concentrating, I know the Medicaid director is concentrating on children's services in the school. Has that been a help at all? Do you feel any of that at this point? Have you been in any talks at the state level?
Not me personally,
Well, yeah.
but as an agency, we take all the managed Medicaid insurance plans, and so I know that there's been a number of talks about how to support kids, especially as things change from an insurance standpoint and a coverage standpoint. We do a lot of links with the Saratoga County Health Navigator system to help parents and find health insurance when their kids don't have it. I think that's more the area that we see it is how to help families get coverage if they don't have it.
And do you find that more of the district that you work with more than other schools? Like, is it, I'm just making up, would it be Orange and Shattuckon versus Tasago, Aranda? I mean, things like that. Or is it, do you feel it's across the board?
What's across the board?
Do you feel the services are across the board clear? Okay.
Definitely across the board.
Anybody else in the public? Please.
I have, I'm sorry, you brought up a really good point about the CSE integration. So my daughter's in middle school. So in middle school, each grade has a counselor. And that counselor has, I think, around 300 students per grade. So you're saying that the professionals within the CSE meetings are supposed to be taking on those roles and those tasks. I think that's a really difficult thing for one individual to do when you're looking at the number of kids that have mental health diagnosis or that are not diagnosed yet, and this is the place where they're going to get the help, or they have diagnoses and school is a trigger and they need more assistance here. You have one person per grade at a middle school level and one person, or she went to Oranjan, one person in Oranjan to aid how many, 800 students. What is the plan to integrate more folks into this? Because I don't even think that the counselors at these levels have enough mental health awareness and education as far as our brains are not here to handle what society is giving us today in any capacity as children or as adults. And what kids are exposed to today in our schools, hearing what other kids are saying and what's happening at their home and trying to process it, it's just way too much for their little brains. So what's the plan for the district as a whole to move forward one grade with more than one person?
It's interesting, because I had a student today that is homeschool, because she was elementary to drive, we integrate the school community after discharge from Portland. So I definitely see that on a clinical level as well. But and the homeschooling thing would be not as cost effective as the economic support. My
Has
brother's
been
Russian.
out of school numerous times for medical
I
issues.
don't
And I
have
have
that
never
option.
received a call to see how are we going to integrate her back in, ever. What is the plan? How are we going to integrate her? What supports do we need to get her back? I had to fight for those. I had to go to different levels to get that. And I'm just wondering where that gap is and what the plan is.
So I think a couple of things that's important to point out. Two very related but very distinct service provisions. Our affiliation partnership with Saratoga for Center for the Family, just like she said, it's no different than someone going to some other provider. We recognize that that's a challenge for some families, a challenge for children and schedules. So to bring that for the convenience of having it here. The CSC process is a completely different process. We're fortunate as a school district that we have school psychologists and other parties in every school that deal with specific cases. And when necessary, we seek outside consult evaluations to make sure that appropriate diagnosis is made. So that's why I want to make sure that people, and we're doing it very distinctly, because what we don't want to do is have processes become so watered down that all of a sudden the resource or the convenience of the resource that we're trying to provide get diluted to the point where it's not working the way we should work. And as the caseload or the demand increases, as Tracy pointed out, we have increased on that side of it. On the same note, we have many different providers that we use for special education purposes beyond our internal experts. So I want to make sure people understand two very distinct processes, even though sometimes the need of students may overlap. Back to her graphic, we recognize that, but we have to keep the processes very distinct.
It would be interesting to know, with the children that are diagnosed through the CSE or recognized through the CSE, what their background is, and if this program right here will, in supporting it, as Bill Casey had already mentioned, will reduce that need or reduce those cases down the road because it's early intervention. I do see overlap. I understand what you're saying. You're approaching it separately, and I think this young woman over here was pointing out that on the one side she feels it's under-resourced potentially, and on this side the two could complement each other. They could work together towards that end, which is to get everyone back into school, having in a healthy learning environment, having a positive educational experience, ultimately graduating and ultimately going out into the workforce and being a healthy, successful individual.
I don't disagree that they're completely separate, but they do overlap.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good, sir?
Ms. Carmen, does the data that you've been collecting suggest that this is a problem that's on the rise and therefore might require more funding?
Great question.
But you see more cases.
Yeah, I mean, we,
More and more cases.
yeah.
I just have a sense of it. I'm just the guy. My kids come
Yeah.
home and there's more and more social pressures.
Well, I mean, we're seeing, I mean, it's no doubt. And the question is, I think that one of maybe the second slide Mrs. Carmen put up was an important slide. It becomes also a definitional thing. What are we defining and what are we diagnosing and how do we separate or identify appropriately? And I say that so there's always those obvious and then there's a fine line between certain things. And so one of the, and also that then dictates the degree of support or the intensity of support, if you want to look at it that way, that's provided to students. For some students, it's, I mean, for instance, a perfect example, if you go to the high school on any given day, we have several therapy dogs at the high school. For some students, and I saw today, I was there at the high school for about 2 hours today, and it was just amazing to watch 1,000+ kids transition through the hallway. This dog sits in the middle of the hallway, and probably one out of every 10 kid would stop, calm, and pet the dog, relax for a little bit. And so I was kind of curious, and so I started counting the difference between boy, girls, and I was just trying to, just from my own anecdotal, and started asking. I asked one young lady, what does she like? I do this every day because it helps me calm before I go to a particular class. And I thought that was so I say that in the sense that okay, for her it's a calming piece of it, but so I don't know what's the extent beyond what she said, but I'll just give you an example of something that's quite frankly pretty simple. The dog is a great dog, not saying it's simple to have a great dog, to something that much more therapeutic. So I think that's one of the things we're trying to do as a system, not to paint everyone with the same brush because of a title, versus looking at individual needs as much as we possibly can and provide those support services along the way. And that's the reason why we have the room at the high school that has everything from, quite frankly, a comfortable space, so sometimes a kid just need to come and relax and breathe and meditate or whatever you may need, to the point where they may be sitting with Tracy in a service or sitting with one of our counselors. So it across the board, but we're seeing that and it's kind of hard to pinpoint any one thing. Sometimes people say it's the stresses of life, and life is much more stressful. Who knows? But the reality of it is, whatever the source, we're trying to address it on the backside to not have those things have an adverse impact on the educational experience of our students.
Line item in the budget for
It depends. I mean, so how you look at it? For Saratoga, for the Center for the Family, I think we're up to, I don't know what.
20.
So it's the difference between what we pay versus what they're billing for. That's a whole different piece of it. But when we think about, I mean, we're pretty fortunate as a school. When you think about every building has a counselor, a psychologist. We have several social workers across the board, and so I say that because in past years when budgets were tight in schools, people were cutting out. Unfortunately, counselors and social workers, in fact, quite frankly, we struggle with that here as a system to say, can we have these people, particularly elementary level across schools, but we kept those things in the budget. Do I hope, quite frankly with you, that we never have to increase it because we don't have the need, but the reality of it is we probably will be increasing services because we see the need.
1 in 5 people.
1 in 5.
Yep.
20% of the population, margins for the academic.
That's tomorrow night. Come to the high school to hear that presentation. Thursday night.
Gary's got some.
Yes.
This will be great.
Let me know if this is the direction you're going.
Mike?
Model I'm using. The model I'm using is the medical model in underdeveloped countries. There aren't enough physicians to go around to deal with all of the illnesses. Certainly not the ones that really, really require their attention. So what they've done is they've created something of a pyramid. And there are various levels of sophistication in training. At the lowest level, people are given training in the village. So perhaps a mother will know enough to cleanse the wound and make sure that it does not become infected, therefore does not need medical treatment at all. Or someone who has an infection might be treated by someone who has a 10-week course in intense first aid or whatever. They see the vast majority of the people, and they are channeled up depending on the magnitude, significance of the problem, to more and more sophisticated. So consequently, only the most challenging ones reach the ones that are most trained and able to deal with them. This way you don't have, you're not squandering highly trained people dealing with relatively insignificant things, and you get more results out of all of your efforts. Is that the sort of direction we're going in?
I would say to some degree, yes, Gary, because one of the things we spend a lot of time, we continue to spend a lot of time, is actually with our guidance counselors, because guidance counselors have students assigned, is to also enhance their knowledge, their skill set, so they can in fact have, quite frankly, which I'm going to use this word, intelligent conversation with kids, and also be able to differentiate where's my threshold, where have I reached my level of competence, so to speak, and subsequently need to push it to the next level. So to some degree, that's the case. We also know that there are a lot of outside providers within the region that people utilize. And so how do we build relationships with parents to access information from outside providers so we can have a better understanding of students? And that's always the piece that's always a struggle too, because the reality of it is, and the statistics that were just shared, the reality of it is, in many cases, people don't want necessarily someone else to know, and we run into that all the time, where we would love to know more about what's going on with a child, but we can't because of privacy rights unless someone gives us permission. So I think that's one of the things that, as this forum is a perfect example of that, as we build a community culture of people coming together on behalf of, I think people will be more open to talk about mental illness. Mental illness is still a difficult conversation for people to have. And we know it. And so we struggle sometimes with parents saying, let us share the information from your professional with our professional, with our psychologists, with our social workers. And so what we're trying to build is that same capacity, Gary. So using your village analogy, so surely the entire village trying to support the needs of our students, and not just having one organization, because we can't contract enough with outside agencies to address the needs. We have to build partnerships, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we continue doing. That's why I applaud the board for having this conversation, because there are things about kids and families that we'll never know, because kids and families will never reveal them to us, and unfortunately, in some cases, kids suffer in silence.
I would, in my model, I would envision the teachers and staff, your lunchroom people, your bus drivers,
That's a
and
big
so
part.
forth, being attuned to things
Signs.
that aren't quite right.
Signs of it.
Signs of it.
80% of people go undiagnosed and don't seek attention, or medical attention, when they're suffering from a mental illness. And from the training standpoint, moving forward, one of the things that we keep doing as a district is mental health first aid training, which is offered through our professional development. I have somebody from the outside that comes in and does training. We do, I meet with different departments. Tracy's done a lot of different things with staff regarding professional development. We still have obviously more work to do, and it's continuing to build those community partnerships, and how do we engage family in the process. But training is a huge piece of it for staff as well as for students.
Sometimes just the culture of nurturing and caring so that the child at the lowest level of need recognizes there's somebody out there that cares for them. It may stop it from going any further.
And if I can just add a piece about resiliency, if you have someone there's been all sorts of statistics about resiliency and promoting resiliency in children. And if you have just one person that crosses paths with them, that can listen to them, that can hear what's happening with them, they don't have to necessarily know the whole story. But Becky and I were talking today about how the kitchen staff and cafeteria staff of Chattacon and Arundel have probably done more to promote resiliency in students than I can't even cite a statistic, because they've just been amazing. 2 kids in particular that just never had enough food, and those staff members greeted them every single day, gave them love, gave them food, big smile, and every single day those kids felt loved by those kitchen staff members and cafeteria workers. So that kind of stuff promotes resiliency without them needing to know the full story of what was going on in their lives.
Ma'am, in the front row, did you have a question? Comment? Yeah.
Actually, it's more like a comment.
Sure.
So this program is basically like a diagnostic the kids and find the kids who have mental problems and try to fix it. I have 2 kids. It's 13 and 15. So based on my observation, I think prevention is mostly important than fixing. I like the dog comfort the kids, and also Gary mentioned about the fundamental education. From my experience and my observation of my friends' circles, I think the parents are the most important. Mental health is important, and they can prevent it. And I attend the school parenting training about the teenagers and stuff like that. I think it's very good, but I'd rather ago, I just Googled on YouTube and happened they found a series of lecture called Positive Psychology. It actually is a Harvard lecture class. It's a Harvard class. So they have like 24 classes, only 23 lectures on the YouTube. The one missing is about humor because the professor is not good at humor, so he asked the assistant to do the humor section, but that section is missing. So it's on YouTube. You just search positive psychology and you will find it. It's in one section and you can see all of them. I only watched like 5, 6 of them, but get lots of benefit. And he did mention it's like people focus on anxiety and depression, a lot of money and research on those, and very few focus on the positive psychology. It's basically it's 21 to 1 or 22 to 1, the ratio.
That's true, but sometimes mental illness is not a character flaw, it's a chemical flaw. So sometimes it's just not a choice, it's just the way you're wired. The chemical
That's the
issue.
I understand. Yeah. But because I do have a graduate and they have a research. And I think, yeah,
I think a great point, and just for the public, we started several years ago at elementary, what we call parent speaker series, and try to have different topics. And I could almost guarantee you, because I'm going to tell some folks to put some stuff together, to do some parent, I don't want to say forums, because sometimes forums people don't get a chance to get engaged. And that's again, back to kudos to the board to try to engage the public. And as a school, and the whole notion is that we hope that if we build it, that people will come. Because it's always a thing too. We spend a lot of time, we bring outside resources in, and 3 people show up, and which is fine. We'll do for the 3. But I said it because that's why even on Thursday, the collaboration with the sheriff, the town, all these folks around the opiate abuse piece, we just don't want people to come because they have a personal experience. Come because how do you avoid having a personal experience? You know, so I think that's where sometimes, unfortunately, until the crisis hit home, people don't pay attention, so to speak. And so as a system, we want to put information out there. And so we'll look at the forum, but we'll also look to see what information we could vet and even put on our website as a resource link to parents to tap into, to go to, look at this, those kind of things. So we'll try to look at that as well. Again, try to be a resource to the community is what we're trying to do, not only tonight, but otherwise. So great point.
Could I ask something about that? Is it possible to record those sessions for those who cannot attend?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
always
yeah.
better to be there in person.
Some of them depends on the structure we try to do.
Right,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
fantastic,
Yeah.
thanks.
Any other questions or comments out there? I'm not ignoring you, I just want to make sure. Nobody else? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have 2 daughters, I have 4 children. 2 of them have severe, pretty bad emotional or mental storage issues. I struggle with the wording. I have another daughter who escaped anything hereditarily, and she doesn't understand it. And she's a sweetheart and wonderful at heart, but she's very abusive when it comes to her 2 younger sisters who typically the youngest, who she sees as rebellious and bad, and she doesn't understand the end, whatever it is that she has that prevents her from coping with that situation. And I've seen her punch her in the stomach, and it breaks my heart. And I was just wondering, and she's such a sweetheart, but I'm just wondering if there's any kind of resources for children or any ways for them to learn about others that suffer and
opposite side of the coin.
Yeah.
I hope I made sense.
Yeah, no, you did, it made exact sense. You made a lot of sense. And do you have kids, your kids are here, Shen?
I have 4 children, yeah.
Okay,
One of them graduated.
so let's, let Mrs. Bush get your number, and I want to follow up with you if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. No, but you absolutely the opposite side of the coin, because we so focus on kids with, I'm going to use the word issue, but the sibling effect is always the other piece of it as well, in terms of how to understand it. Very, very good point. Thank you for bringing it in.
I tried to get her to come here too, and I asked her ahead of time if she would do this for me. So I thought maybe hearing about it, I don't know, I wanted some kind of understanding from her. She'd read it and then right immediately before she had a complete meltdown, forgot, and she knows that everybody's going to be looking at me thinking, I have a disorder or a mental, I don't want her to think of people as not as bad. Or, yeah.
No, good point. No, thank you. Thank you for that.
Sir?
There's a question in the back too.
My name is Subhani Patan. Actually, I have a daughter and a son. We don't have any problem, but I just want to go a little basic issue about as a parent of 2 kids, growing kids. When this mental health or counseling, whatever it is, I know there's so much stigma about the talking outside from the parents' sides also, especially particularly it's not an open society like Western world from the background where I came from. So the mental health is a big issue, but still people don't want to. Absolutely. Okay. But from that background, even a lot of parents, Asians, like especially from India I'm from, they don't want to. But I see, I don't get any notes or something, or even what is the point where you, as a counselor or a psychologist, a lot of resources are available. When you intervene a kid from a student point of view, to notify to the parent that, okay, your kid has some issue. Is it the grades are a criteria, or attendance is a criteria, or do you observe something in the school? I don't know, but they just want to learn it from you. When is the point you get us as a parent to notify? Because there are personality differences or image differences. The kids come from the school, in the home they may be different than the school. So our kids may be good in school, but when they go to home, may be different.
Yeah.
I want to learn it. What is your procedure, or maybe a date when you intervene or notify us?
So, I mean, if, again, depends on the level of intervention. If it's a informal conversation with a kid who's having a bad day, depends on how the bad day is. That could be, you're good, okay, the child is fine, versus if it's something that we realize that, okay, there needs to be a follow-up or follow-through. And that's also, to some degree, based upon age of kids as well. So if there is something that's deemed to be, so if you kind of put in this concern, problem, crisis in that progression, if something is more on the low concern, there may not necessarily be a formal notification. If something on the concern looking to be a problem, then we have to get the parents involved, because then we figure out how do we build that partnership around, because you're right, understanding behavior in school and understanding behavior at home might be 2 completely different things. So we certainly want to do that piece of it. And on the same note, it's a reciprocal relationship, because if a parent sees a particular behavior at home and wondering, is the child acting that way at school, that's where the communication to the school becomes important, to say, this is what we're seeing at home. Are you guys seeing this at school, and why not? And then try to have that conversation. So a big point of this is that, there are many different situations. However, if we as a community have an open mind to have conversations without attaching stigmas to it, because at the end of the day, trust me, if you ask my staff, I'm the moodiest person in the world. And so we all have things that we struggle with every day that we have to program ourselves to engage and interact with people in certain ways. So I say that, so I think if we as a community embrace this as, and that's the reason why we put the wellness piece on it, embrace this, how do we create a well society where it doesn't matter what you bring to the table, we all have unique strengths and unique differences and unique challenges, and so how do we then wrap around and try to support those things? And you brought up another point too, we see that also with cultural differences and how we communicate because of those type things. So the more conversation we have, the more open we can be. And so again, appreciate you bringing that perspective, because those are all the challenges we deal with in the system, not only from mental health, from academics, from all those type things, the differences that people, expectations that people bring to the table. I think there was a lady in the back side.
Yes, in the back, yeah.
Hi. Usually I'm hiding behind an email, but my son is in 10th grade, in his 8th grade. He tried to commit suicide here. It was very, very tough, but your guidance counselors did an awesome job with helping the students that knew him, did an awesome job with telling us what was going on. Through the years, I've made it known to all of his teachers what has happened. He's become an amazing child. He is in the Navy Sea Cadets now in 10th grade, and that program has just made a world of difference. Some of the things though that we've dealt with, like him needing to be in that weightlifting class instead of a gym class, and him not being a part of the athletics department, he wasn't going to be allowed to be in it, and I had to fight and fight and fight for that. Even though I told the person, the athletic director, that we had all these issues happening. I just wanted to tell you though, besides that one incident, your staff has been absolutely amazing. Almost every teacher has always reached back out to me to thank me for telling them what has happened with my son in his life. And just they've always been there for us. Now that he's in health in 10th grade, the health teacher has been amazing with all the health classes and any mental health thing. She makes sure I know anything that's happening, so I really thank you for that.
And your communication is key to that whole thing, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we're about at the end of the time here. We have a couple more, if there's a couple more comments, otherwise we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
There's someone in the back.
Oh, was there someone, ma'am?
Yeah.
And then,
I just have a quick question. You mentioned something about students at high school having access for student loans. I want to talk a little bit more about that to understand what is available for students actually at all levels for reaching out and
I would say the first point of contact at all our buildings are counselors. Mrs. Carmen spent a lot of time with K-8 counselors in particularly, talking about how do we be a confidant to kids and talk to kids in a way that quite frankly we're not imposing an adult perspective on a child's perspective. So I would say that's one great point of contact, and we trust and hope that your child or you have a working relationship or good enough relationship with that counselor. And if not, I'm going to put Becky out there as well, because I'm a redundancy person. So if one thing doesn't work, I want another thing as a backup. And if you don't, I would tell you reach out to Becky, because sometimes we find out that different people in the district relate differently or better to different kids. And so if we try to match some of those resources and help bridge those gaps, especially initially, is important. So definitely do that as well. So what we don't, the worst thing we could ever do is someone say, well, I didn't know who was the right person. Worst case scenario, call my office. We'll find you the right person to make sure there's a person that you and your child can relate to in a way that's confidential, but more important in a way that there's a degree of comfort for your child.
My question was more, is there an awareness for our students to know that is available, and how is that
Yes.
transmitted to the students so that they know that there's something there if they need to reach out and they're uncomfortable outside of their home to do that, or if there's an immediate
Yeah.
resource? Do we make our students aware of that? And so
There is between teachers talking about, so at different levels have different things. Counselors have regular sessions, teachers talk about it, and so the piece that you're right, the piece that we're always fearful of is how do we miss that really quiet kid that doesn't say anything to anyone. That's always the one we're most fearful about, because it's easy to see the obvious ones, and it's easy to see the parent behind the email who sends us, hey, I'm not referring to this lady, but some parents who send us about everything about this, and then we have the quiet ones, and so then it's an ongoing piece for us. This is an ongoing piece between counselors, and Tracy pointed out even support staff in cafeterias, seeing a certain kid who may sit by him or herself all the time, or certain things about him, saying, hey, somebody should find out what's going on with this kid, or see a big change in behavior of a child between being going from one direction. Those are some of the kind of sort of signs and symptoms of things that we're constantly trying to get all our staff or more staff to recognize that. We don't want people, don't claim to be a doctor, but know enough to see that something is going on. Maybe someone else should intervene as well. So I think those things are important. And as we kind of go to wrap up, I just want to emphasize again that as parents, as community members, don't wait till it's your kid. It could be someone else that you notice something, and that you say, you know what, there's something, my son's friends, my daughter's friends, there's something going on. You know what, I'd rather err on the side of that than err on the side of someone didn't say anything till after the fact. And unfortunately, we see that too many. After the fact, coming to somebody, oh my God, I kind of noticed. Well, it doesn't matter now. It's too late in those very extreme situations. So we really want to say, if people really, same thing we say kids about school security, see something, say something. We all have a responsibility in the community to do those type of things, because we interact with kids differently. I may see a kid one way, but you see a kid in a different environment, and the kid is a completely different kid, and you say, whoa, what's going on? So I really hope that as a community, as a society, we can truly get rid of the stigma and forget about, we all have problems. So let's get a given. We all have problems. The question is, how do we create an environment where kids can thrive and be the best at who they are? And I think that's the crux of this whole community conversation we're trying to build. And build forward. So there are some things that we'll do, I think, more so even as a result of this conversation tonight as well.
I promise, let me grab her the last, go ahead. Did you have something?
Somebody right in the back.
Talked about the dogs in the high school level. Has there been any discussion on bringing that to the lower levels?
Well, they're all over now. So that's another problem we're trying to do. We're trying to contain how, so in other words, what we want to do, make sure it's for truly for a purpose and not just for a fad. So we work on that.
They use them in hospitals, they use them in nursing homes. They have the library. They definitely provide a purpose. Some kids benefit, some kids might not benefit.
So we're working on that now.
Yep. So go ahead.
The one thing I want to say is, last year you sent out this message for the 13 reasons why everybody always is talking about that show.
Yep.
And of course my kids came home and said, oh, we want to watch that. Everybody's talking about it at school. And I'm like, well, then I need to watch it first. And I did. And I said, no, if you watch that, you're watching it with me. So of course I'm going to watch it. But if there's other things like those shows that are very influential on these kids and kids are impressionable, it would be great if those messages went out.
We did do that.
And we will.
There are shows that are like,
We did do that.
And we will. I mean, it's a constant piece, and we're very thoughtful, though, of not doing something and have a totally unintended consequence on certain things. So, but yeah, I think you're right in trying to do that in a very thoughtful way, probably the best way I can say it, and communication out. And so even after tonight, I have probably 10, 15 things going through my head right now that I think that information that we can share out, how we can share out information differently, how we create much more of a community resource for people, because we have a wealth of last page was on this, was a resource list. We have a wealth of information that's out there now that we could try to get better in the hands of parents, so people could become their own advocate and work, because again, your kid is your kid first and foremost. We only borrow them for 6 hours a day. And so we certainly want to build those partnerships. So thank you for the recommendation as well.
Yeah.
Cindy,
Cindy, did you have something?
I don't have any comments or.
okay.
Okay, all right.
I just
Yes.
want to comment to the, one moment though, we did send a SIS message out on that one.
On the
Yeah,
13th.
no, we did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
She's saying
okay, I
more
just
of
want to
us.
make sure that was clear,
Exactly.
okay.
Your last question, you answered the question.
She did.
Yeah. So let me just wrap it up. Sometimes in the daytime, I help out with some facilities thing at the Albany airport. So at the end of the day, somebody called me and said, you know, it rained like hell earlier today and the water's pouring in the windows. Can you get somebody up here to caulk it? And we probably can. And putting that caulk on solves the problem. It's easy. This isn't easy. The more we talk here tonight, the more we hear the various elements that are being touched, whether it's your daughter who's reacting to her siblings, or it's somebody in the classroom reacting to them. Because one of the things that we're in the prevention part is there can be behaviors which are disruptive. And they're not only disruptive to the student, they're disruptive to other kids. And having an understanding of that and working with our students, working with our staff is really a critical element. And there's no simple answer, but I hope you leave here tonight with an understanding that as a district, we're really committed to what we can do across the board and involve as many people as possible. It's heartwarming to me to hear that the 2 cafeteria workers figured out one of these. It's the bus driver who says there's something wrong here, you know, and passes it along the line. So we're thankful that you all came tonight. We have wonderful resources. They're available to you. We can, Becky leads a lot of the charge here, and we're really thankful. We piloted this with the Center for the Family, and we've been, the early success rate has allowed us actually to consider and expand that service. But there's no one answer. There isn't any caulk that's going to solve this. You know, there's no simple medicine either that solves it.
Yeah. One comment, and if I could ask people to do this, and the gentleman asked about funding, one comment that every community resident can advocate for is advocate that as a state, as a federal level, that we look at mental health provision and services as a priority and fund it accordingly. Because I got to tell you, right now, laws are being passed, mandate that schools do this, but the reality of it is we have a finite footprint, and we prioritize within that footprint. And while we all want to do more, the reality is you can only do so much. So if there's advocacy, I would strongly encourage people to advocate with your state legislators, advocate with folks to say, get off the dime, literally and figuratively, and look at the issues surrounding mental health. If you look at the correction systems, most people are in prison because they had some kind of mental health that wasn't addressed, that turned into activities that been criminalized. If you look at kids who are failing in schools, many instances related to that. So I say that either we're going to pay a hell of a price later, or we try to advocate right now. And that's what you as a community can do. You have voices as a community. So I said, don't wait for one person to champion the cause. Get on your email, get on your letter. The more people advocating for these type things make us a better community. And I know that's going to be one of our champion calls this year, because we want to see a great expansion of mental health services, not only in Shen, but in schools in general. But that's where the advocacy needs to come into play, because even right now, the funding, the healthcare funding for mental health is being bastardized. And so it's becoming difficult for parents to get, okay, is this fundable by my insurance company? Is this? And the fact, when the minute it becomes a question, people back away from it because they're not sure if they can incur the cost. So I really want to say, if you walk out of here and regardless of your circumstance, that's something that we can do as a society. Advocate that this is an issue that cuts across everyone. And we need to be a collective voice to say this is something that we want to see more support of, not only in the schools, but in our communities in general, and the various service providers that that wraps around our kids every day. So please, use your voice and advocate on the state level and on the federal level, and we'll be doing some advocacy as well. So we want people to champion some of those causes. They hear from the superintendent, yeah. They hear from you. You're a different person. You go in the ballot box and make a choice and those kind of things. So please advocate for those type of things, because that's how we make a difference. Please do.
Consider an SIS on that?
Once we get to that, yes, once we get an advocacy piece, yep.
Yeah,
So thank you.
Gary, you want to do the wrap-up, right?
Well, no, actually, I don't. I don't know the answer to that, and I wanted, not only want to know it, but I wanted other
Yeah, there is
people
a,
to know.
there is a program Thursday night. It's here at the,
Becky gives the wrap up here.
okay.
Our next public forum.
So Thursday night, we have a community conversation that's sponsored by many of the town supervisors, Shenendehowa School District. We will be offering at High School West. It starts 6 o'clock is tabling, 6:30 to 8 is our program. We will be talking about the opioid epidemic and heroin. We have 4 panel members, a doctor from Albany Med, a drug enforcement agent, a Shenendehowa parent who lost her son to a heroin overdose, and a recovering addict. And we will also be doing a drug take-back from 5 to 8:30 that evening. We'll also have over there so people can bring any unused medications or drugs that they have and toss them in, get some information, some resources, and listen to the community conversation that we're going to have.
So thank you. So we'll end this part of the meeting. I do want to point out, if anyone would like to contact us, it's very easy. I'm tapping into the Shen website, and you can email the board at boe@shenet.org, and we'll respond to you. And any suggestions, any thoughts you have after this, we would be glad to receive them and to respond to you. Thank you for coming. We'll take like a 5-minute break. Don't feel bad if you were at this and you're off to something else. And at 7:20, we'll move to our regular board meeting, okay? Thank you all very much.